This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect. Just give me a second. Okay. So in the last call, we had discussed about the architecture, right? So if you remember, we discussed about the metadata, how MicroStrategy interacts with metadata, what is the role of metadata, and how the query execution flow happens and everything. Okay. In today's call, we will try to understand a bit of about the environment setup. Okay, or the MicroStrategy admin module that we had discussed during the demo call. Now, what are the things that you need in order to set up an environment? First, definitely, you will install the software, and for that, I will ask BigClasses to share the links with you, like from where you can download the evaluation version and so on. Okay, so that's something we will definitely provide all the information up to you, along with the license key, of course. Okay, so well, let's say once you install the software and I want to set up the environment. Okay, uh, let's say any environment, dev environment or a testing environment. For that, definitely I need one database to configure my metadata, and I need just the MicroStrategy software. So there are few things that you need to take care of, and we will take it as a step-by-step process. First step, sorry, the first step that we have in order to configure the environment, the first thing that we will start with is configuring metadata. In in order to configure the metadata, what I need is just a blank database, or you can say as blank schema, under which all my repository will be created. So when I say the metadata also is a kind of a repository, it consists of all the tables and columns, correct? Where my all the information and definitions will be recorded. Okay, so what we're going to do for our training is we're going to use Microsoft Access as my database. Okay, we will use it for the metadata, and we will use the same Microsoft Access database for the warehouse as well. Definitely it will have two separate informations, but yeah, for our training I'm going to use Microsoft Access. In a real-time scenario, it could be anything. It could be Oracle, Teradata, Netezza, SQL Server, anything. Okay, so what we're going to do is first we will create a blank Microsoft Access file, which is going to be like a blank schema in order to configure the metadata. Okay, so let's get started. I will go to Microsoft Access, and guys, feel free to interrupt me. Okay, we will keep this as much interactive as possible. So nothing to you don't have to wait till end and ask the questions. You can feel free to just interrupt me and shoot out with your any questions that you have. Okay, all right. So now we're going to start with the Microsoft Access. One second. I think something has changed. Okay, I'll just say new. Okay, here we go. And I will just give today's date. I'm going to say this is my MSTR metadata, and let's say 18 July 2019. I will save it under some folder. Let's say that's one. Okay, under T folder. I'm going to save it and say create. So now you can see this is just a blank access database. We have not created any tables, any columns, nothing. It's completely blank database. And let's say that you're working on Oracle. You just need a blank schema. That's it. You don't have to create any tables as of now. We just need a schema. Clear? So as of now, this has been done. So the first step has been created where I need a kind of a blank database. Now remember one thing. Whenever you want MicroStrategy to interact with your database, either it's for metadata or for your data fetching, it will always be done using ODBC. Okay, that's an open database connector. Okay, so MicroStrategy will talk to ODBC, and ODBC is something which will have the information about your database connectivity. That's the second step. Okay, so we already have the database in place. Second, we will create a ODBC which will be mapped to that particular database. And then as a last step, we will start configuring the metadata. So MicroStrategy will talk to ODBC, and ODBC is something which will be having information about your database. Correct? So as a second step, we need to create a ODBC which is pointing to the Microsoft Access file that we have just created it. Correct? So what I'm going to do is, now I'm using Microsoft Access. So I will go to ODBC 32-bit. Microsoft Access is a, like I have is a 32-bit. In case let's say you're using SQL Server, you'll go to ODBC 64-bit. So depending upon what is the software bit, like based on that you need to choose your corresponding ODBC. So I will select ODBC data source 32-bit because I want to map it to Microsoft Access. I'll go to the system DSN, and over here I'm going to make a new entry. So when I click on add, this will show me all the drivers, the database drivers, and depending upon the database that you're using, you have to select the corresponding driver. So I'm using Microsoft Access. I'm going to select Microsoft Access driver. In case you're using, let's say, SQL Server, I'm going to select the SQL Server driver. So I'm quite sure that you would be aware about the ODBC definitions, but still, you need to create an ODBC and you need to select the driver corresponding to your database. In case you do not see the required database driver listed over here, you can just go to the, you can just search out on Google, like, okay, I need a ODBC 32 or ODBC 64-bit driver for Oracle. Just a exe file that you need to run, and that particular ODBC driver will be added over here. Okay, uh, I see one question over here. What is ODBC? ODBC is a open data source connector. It is nothing related to MicroStrategy. Okay, it's just a Windows component. It's a ODBC is a, how can I explain like in detail, is that it just that it maps to your database information. I think on any warehouse project that you would have worked, you would always need a ODBC. It's a Windows component basically, and ODBC has information about your database. Okay, let's say you want to connect to Oracle. Okay, and there are no tools that can connect directly. There are tools, I would say, but it always there are something which always routes via ODBC, and that's what it is all about. Okay, so ODBC is nothing, to cut in short, it has the information about your database environment. Okay, and it always open a kind of a connection to database based on the details that you enter. Does that answers your query?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to select Microsoft Access driver over here. I'll give some name. Okay, and I'm going to select the access file, the file that we have just created it. Okay, so I'm going to click on select. I'll go to the D location, and this is the one, right? 18 July 1. So I'm going to select, and I'm going to say okay. That's it. So if you look over here, I have a lot of metadata files. So yeah, str metadata 18 July 2019. Yeah, this one. So you can see this particular entry has been added up. So even my second step has been completed, where we have the MSTR metadata for ODBC. The Third and the final step is to start configuring the metadata. Now understand this thing. When I say I want to configure the metadata, it's actually I'm creating an entire repository. I'm actually creating the tables and columns which can store the information and definition as I have explained you in the earlier call. To store this information, definitely you will need a repository. You will need all the tables and columns, and that's what exactly it will happen in this particular step. In order to configure the metadata, I have a component within my MicroStrategy software which is called as configuration wizard. A configuration wizard will always be part of your MicroStrategy software, and this is something which will allow you to create your or to configure your metadata. Okay, so let me first open the configuration wizard. Okay, this is part of your MicroStrategy software. Okay, so when you install the software, thereafter only you will see something called as configuration wizard. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, so now you can see this is my MicroStrategy configuration wizard, and there are a lot of things that you can do it over here. I can create the metadata, I can configure my server, create a project source, upgrade the environments from one version to the other version, and so on. So there are a lot of things that you can do. But as of now, my our main focus is to create the metadata. History list, enterprises are all advanced admin related things, so we don't have to worry about this. So as of now, I'm just interested with creating the metadata. And as I've told you, even this is something which will be done by administration, okay, which will be done by your MicroStrategy administrator team. But yeah, as of now, we still cover over here. So I'm just going to click on next. I'm really not interested with any other things except metadata. I'm going to say next. And now if you look over here, this shows me, this particular drop down shows me all the ODBCs that are present on my machine. And that's the reason first we created the ODBC and then we came to the MicroStrategy configuration wizard. Okay, so you can see over here all the ODBCs are listed over here, and we have to select the correct one, that is under which we need to configure our metadata. Okay, so I'm going to select this one, that is MSTR metadata 18 July 2019. Perfect. So under this, at least I'm asking MicroStrategy, okay, use this particular ODBC connection which is indirectly connected to my database, and under that particular database I want to configure my metadata. Fair enough. I'm going to click on next. It will connect to that database, and once I click on finish, my metadata will be configured successfully. Now let's think logically how this particular step will allow, or how, what is the backend process that will ensure that my metadata will be configured. If you look at very closely, there is one script file that has been picked up automatically from my installation folder, and this particular script file is nothing but just a create table statements. Okay, and this will make sure when this script gets executed at the backend, it will make sure that all my required metadata tables will be created. I will show you that SQL just as a reference, and please make a note, we never ever have to make any change to that SQL, never. Okay, so let me go to this folder where my microstrategy is installed. Okay, and I'm just going to directly go to those SQL files. Okay, so the one that I'm highlighting, those are all metadata creation scripts. It starts with a file name MD, that is for metadata, and after that it's followed with the type of database that you're using. So I'm using Microsoft Access, so it's going to pick up this file, that is MDACC, metadata for access. So if I show you this SQL, as you can see over here, it has all the create table statements and so on. This is just for your reference. Okay, we're not going to make any change to the script. This comes along with your installation application. Okay, so as you can see over here, it's all create table statements, and once you click on finish over here, it is actually this particular script file which will be executed, and that's how it's going to make sure that your metadata is configured correctly. Similarly, let's say you're using Oracle to configure the metadata. This file will be picked up, that is mdorcl, and even this will have the same list of tables, but just that it would be a syntax change here and there, nothing else. The number of tables, the name of tables, the structure of tables are all going to remain the same irrespective of any database that you use to have your metadata configured on top of that. Okay, so once I go back to the configuration wizard and if I click on finish, you can actually visualize the script file that I showed you is something which will be executed. Okay, it's a script file that will be executed, and once that script file has been executed successfully, we can say my metadata is configured successfully. So it will hardly take a minute or so, and once that has been done, we will go back to that database, the access database file. Okay, and we will see whether all my tables have been created or not. Okay, just as a verification. So let's just wait for this process to get complete. Okay, and as you can see now, this step is completed. So the confirmation is my metadata is configured successfully. But let's try to validate. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to that folder. This is the file. This is the access file. And now when I open, you will see a tons of tables that have been created automatically. Initially, when we created the files, it was completely a blank database. But now as you can see, there are lots of tables which are created, and all the tables that starts with DSS. Whenever you come across, whenever you're working on MicroStrategy and you come across any table that says okay, its name starts with DSS, those are all metadata related tables. Okay, so as you can see, all these tables have been created. You don't worry about all those things. We never have to update this manually, never. It's a MicroStrategy tool, so whenever you do any activity on MicroStrategy, automatically these tables will be updated. So you don't have to do any select, any updates, nothing. This is just for your understanding as to how the software or how the tool technically works. I'll take a pause over here. Any question, please?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Panish. So these tables are different from the actual tables that we create in the reports, right?
Yep.
The okay. These are just for the configuration.
This, as I said, if you remember that archetype diagram, and I've told you metadata is the heart of MicroStrategy. It's a repository which will store the information and definition about all the objects or whatever activity that you do. Okay, so if tomorrow if I create a object, so that object name, that object definition will be stored over here. if I modify any kind of security for a user, those changes will be recorded over here. So this never has your warehouse information. It is just related to your MicroStrategy thing. So when you run a report, it will first come to the metadata, retrieve those object definition, and it will help the it will help the SQL engine to generate the SQL query. And once that query is generated, thereafter from metadata, it will have the database information as well. So it will open a connection to that database or a warehouse, execute that SQL, and it will get me the required data. So your data warehouse, your MicroStrategy metadata is separate two repositories. MicroStrategy metadata is kind of an environment specific for, let's say, you're working for a client. Okay, and similarly, you will have three warehouse environments in dev, test, and production. You will need a three separate environments for MicroStrategy as well. MicroStrategy metadata environment. Okay, so you will have MicroStrategy metadata repository, one for dev, one for test, and one for production. So one environment, one metadata. It's kind of a one-to-one. Okay, and yes, your assumption, or I would say your understanding, is absolutely correct, that it's completely different. It's nothing related to warehouse. It's a completely different repository and specific to your environment. Does it
So
answers?
yes.
Good.
No, one follow-up question on that. So in a report, if we bring customer, material, sales order, and few other objects, and
Mm-hmm.
run the report, does that report structure save in the metadata or no?
Yes. So if you save the report, even that information will be saved in metadata. It will not store the report data
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah,
very
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but the corresponding information. Okay, this report was created on this date. This report was created by this particular user. This report has this kind of a security access. This report has this many attributes and this many measures. This report has this particular filter. So all that configuring information will be stored in metadata.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and let's say you said something about couple of columns, a couple of fields, I would say, sales order number or an order amount and whatever it is. The way you definitely in now, if I say that you want to use sales order number, order amount, and so on, those field will be created as well in MicroStrategy as a different types of object. So that objects will be pointing to which table and which column. So those object definitions will also be present in metadata. So now when you run that report, it says, okay, this report has two attributes and two measures. Okay, then it will go a level down. This two attributes and this two measures are pointing to which all table, which all fields. What kind of relationship that you have defined. Okay, this is the information. It will pass it on to the SQL engine. SQL engine will read and generate the SQL query. And that's how the query, once that query generation has been done, it will go and hit the warehouse, execute that SQL. So that's the reason we say metadata is very important, because it stores every information, every configuration information, every definition that you do within that particular environment. Am I
So
making sense, guys? Mm-hmm.
yes, so nothing stores at the MicroStrategy report level.
No,
It's just like an interface, it's like a GUI kind of thing for the user.
semantic layer. We call it a semantic layer. That's the reason.
Okay.
Okay, it's a semantic layer, and yeah, there is a one kind of an object. We call it as MicroStrategy cube, which actually stores the data in the MicroStrategy layer. So in this scenarios, what I'm explaining, it will always go to the database. You run the report, it will go to the database and get me the data. But it's a longer process. It's a complete chain. But what if I want to, make it something as a performance better? What I can do is I can create a cube in MicroStrategy, and that cube will retrieve whenever we refresh it, or when we call it as publish. So it will get the data from the database and it will store it at the MicroStrategy level. On top of that cube, I can create my reports. So whenever I run the reports, it will not go to the warehouse. It will directly get the data from the cubes. So these are all advanced thing, but yeah, just to answer your question in short, I would say, or I would say in a simple way as of now. Yes, there is a possibility where you can also store the data at the microstrategy layer, and that's going to be through cubes.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so now my metadata is configured. What is the next step that you will do? In a real time, the next thing that, sorry, the next thing that we generally do is we configure iServer. We call it as microstrategy intelligence server. I will show you that step, but I'm having some discrepancy. There are some, I don't know, there are like in for my one of my previous installation, there are some bad files which are still residing, and it's giving me error. But I will show you the steps. Now, I want to configure my iServer. In a real-time scenario, definitely you will need a server, correct? What is configuring iServer? Configuring iServer means it's pointing to a required metadata, nothing else. It's an instance, it's an environment. So whenever we say iServer, it's nothing, but it's actually pointing to one metadata. And remember one thing, it's one-to-one. One iServer can point to only one metadata. You can use the same metadata to point to multiple servers, but there is no use in that. Why? Because if I'm pointing two servers to one metadata, both of those servers will have same information. So there is no use as such. Yeah, you can do all those clustering and all those part. That's a different story for the administration. But in general, we say it's a one-to-one. Now I want to configure my iServer, which is pointing to the new metadata that we have created it. Yes, it's very simple. And again, you will do that using configuration wizard. Okay, so what you can, if I go back to the configuration wizard, you can see there is an option called as configure intelligence server, and I'll repeat the statement. Configuring intelligence server is nothing but it's actually just a server. You're pointing it to the required metadata. Okay, so I'm going to click on next, and what do you need to do? You need to select the same ODBC under which your metadata is already configured. Okay, so this is the one, and that's it. So remember one thing, you first cannot configure the iServer and then configure the metadata. Not possible. You always have to go as a step by process, and you cannot skip the steps. First, you have to configure the metadata, and then only you can configure the server, because server needs to point to the metadata instance. Okay, so I've selected the same metadata, same ODBC under which my metadata is already configured. I'm going to click on next. This is just a warning, you can say yes. And now it's asking me credential to access the metadata. When you're doing for the first time, this is the default credential, and the ID is administrator and a blank password. You can see there is a note which is already present at the bottom. It says if this is the first time you're connecting to the MicroStrategy server, use the username as administrator without a password. That's a default. Okay, and once I click on next, it will actually connect to my database, but as I said, it's going to throw me an error. Okay, it says the source already exists. I don't know why it keep on saying this, because I keep on changing my MicroStrategy instances on the same machine, and I don't know, for some reason there are some bad DLL files which are still present, and that's the reason it's not allowing me to do it. But that's okay. I will tell you what are the next things that it will show you up, and I would definitely request you guys to do it from your end, and this error will not be there. I can bet on that. Okay, so when you do it from your end, the next thing which it will show is to give a server name, and the server name could be anything. It could be your name, it could be your machine name, it could be a company name, anything. So that name gets associated with the server, and then you can see it's just the server definition. So you just need to give the server name, and then you have to click on finish. So once you click on finish, your iServer will be configured. Okay, and it will be start pointing to the new metadata. Now, as it's forcing me to not go via this particular approach, I have a workaround as well. And what is the workaround? It's kind of a bit kind of an advanced thing, but still let me show you like how I generally switch the metadata, or how I configure the server, because if this is giving me an error. First of all, this will not give you any error when you try it on your machine. Okay, so what I generally do is I already have a iServer. Okay, let me show you that. Okay, so if you look over here, if I go to my MicroStrategy Service Manager, I already have a iServer which is up and running. It's only that I'm not able to change my metadata mapping. Okay, but I have a workaround for that. So what I will do is, let me first show you this step. Okay, so you can see it's my MicroStrategy Intelligence Server. This is the name that I had given initially under the configuration wizard, like when I started using this environment. So as you can see, my iServer is already up and running, but it's pointing to some different instance. Again, it's already pointing to some uh, a particular instance which is having two projects. It's not a blank thing. It's already predefined. So how I can change this? Okay, so what I do is I go and change my ODBC mapping. Okay, my this server is already pointing to some metadata. Okay, and that metadata always gets connected via ODBC. So what I do is I go back to the ODBC. There is something called as analytics metadata. Now this is the ODBC which I had used initially to to configure my metadata, and my iServer is pointing to this particular metadata. So what I can do is I just modify this. Instead of using this metadata, I will just switch it to the new metadata that we have created it. So I go to that folder 18 July wala, this one, correct? I have this one, and I'm going to say okay. So now this analytics underscore metadata is pointing to the new metadata that we have created it. And what I will do is I will just restart my iServer. So this is how I switch my metadatas over here because of that issue. But yeah, as I said, in general, for you guys, it will never ever throw any kind of an error. It's going to be a smooth process. So once you enter the credential, that is IDS administrator and a blank password, it will ask you to give a server name. You can give any name. So I had given my machine name, that is desktop UFBT5NM, but you can give any name. And once you click on finish thereafter, your iServer will be configured successfully. So that's the second step in the configuration where we say I want to configure my iServer. And configuring iServer is nothing. It is just that it's pointing to the required metadata. I will take a pause over here. As you can see, my iServer is getting restarted. It will take around like 2 to 5 minutes. But yeah, I will show you thereafter how it gets reflected. But meantime, any questions or any doubt, please.
Panish.
Yes, please.
So, is there any like a flow diagram for these different steps? How they fit in the whole process?
So that's the reason I'm listing it on a notepad. Okay, so I'm giving a stepwise as well, so that at least you will have that in the recording as well. Like, okay, first you start with the metadata, then you start with the iServer, and there are a couple of more things that you need to take care of. I don't have any flow diagram as such, to be honest, but that's the reason I always open a notepad and show as a step-by-step process,
Yeah.
so that
Uh,
you can. Go ahead.
in the demo, you showed MicroStrategy and then metadata and that
Correct.
data warehouse and all that. But where does the iServer sit in that flow?
It's in the top of the metadata.
Okay.
It's a part of your instance, right? So it's all on top of the metadata. So the iServer sits on the top of the metadata. Okay, it's a one-to-one mapping, as I said, and
Okay.
yeah, and that's where it is. So if you remember that architect diagram, the below portion where we had shown the metadata repository. It's all. It's not exactly the same. Like how I can say is iServer, you can, okay, I don't know. There's something I have to check it out. That's okay. But let me do one thing. Let me just open that flow diagram. Give me a second.
Sure.
So let me just open that PPT again. Let me know you can see my screen about the architect diagram.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when I call this my MicroStrategy instance, okay, sorry, when I call this as my MicroStrategy instance, that is my MicroStrategy server. It's an instance. How you will access the MicroStrategy?
Mm-hmm.
That's my server component. This server component is connected to metadata.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So first we configure the metadata, and on top of that, I configured my iServer. Now iServer is it's a server, so that's where you access your MicroStrategy environment. So once you do any activity in MicroStrategy server, it gets recorded in the metadata. So these two steps we have done it. The next
Okay.
step is how I can connect to my warehouse and everything, and how it will come back to MicroStrategy. So this step is remaining. As of now, we know how to configure the server and how to configure the metadata. So these two instances have been completed.
Oh, got it. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So I would say by this we will stop it over here for today. It's already around 45 minutes. So as I said, uh, first of all, before we discuss on any other part, any questions over here, please. Shravan, anything that you want to discuss, any questions, any queries, or so far it's all okay.
No, I'm fine.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll stop over here for today, and I will ask the classes to share the recordings with you. We will also share the link from where you can download the evaluation version along with the license key. Okay, and yeah, so I'll be off for a week due to medical reasons, and we will resume back by 25th or 26th July. That we will confirm a couple of days early as we resume. But yeah, so I would say we would really apologize for the inconvenience that has been caused to you guys because you have to wait for a week. But yeah, in case meantime you had any questions or something, you can drop us an email and we can definitely reply back with our inputs. So that is all that I have it for today, and let's connect back sometime next week.
Sure.
Before we
Thanks.
log off, any other question, please? Yes, please. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no. I'm just thanking you for the class.
No, no problem, no problem. That's something I don't wanted to skip. So yeah,
Sure. Thank you.
thank you so much, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Panish?